Colleagues, we'll begin our line of questioning today with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. My questions will be for WestJet, Mr. Von Hunschbroek, if I somewhat close to that. So just want to start out with, I understand the argument of the industry with respect to unbundling, and that for passengers who don't want the full, I think you used the example in the media, the full Happy Meal or the full value meal, that they might just want French fries or a hamburger. Now, the obvious question, though, is if you unbundle, then it should be at a reduced cost. Since you've brought out your ultra basic fare, how much cheaper is an ultra basic fare versus a basic fare?
Yeah, so I see it in the exact same way as you do. And I think that's probably also the main misunderstanding in the public space. We have actually reduced our average fare for ultra basic by 14% over what it was before when it was a normal basic fare. So there's a substantial reduction in price. And over the last 6 months, this has actually accumulated to 48 million of savings collectively for all those that used and that booked this fare. So this is a considerable saving.
Thank you very much. I find sometimes that when we talk in generalities that we lose some of the point. And so I want to take a little bit of a different approach and actually go through a fare with you. This is an actual fare that was purchased to fly from Winnipeg to Victoria on WestJet, obviously in December. And so the base fare starts at $197. I think most would agree that's a reasonable price. But after we go through all the add-ons, we're up to $274. So if you would be good enough, I'd like to actually go through each one of these additional fees and maybe have you explain what they are and who they go to. So the first one I have is $30 for YQI in brackets other transportation charges. Could you explain what that is and who benefits from that charge?
Yes, for sure. So first of all, we differentiate between those charges that we charge as an airline that goes straight into the airline, and this what we call air transportation charges, and that includes the base fare and this YQI surcharge that you are mentioning, and then the others are third-party charges that come on top of it. So why do we have a YQI surcharge? Because they are actually infrastructure costs that are embedded in our base fare. So, for instance, navigation charges, that's domestic charge, I think $15 per passenger. That's part of what the airline has to pay, and that's not a flow through that goes through the other taxes and fees. So this is reflected in there, and the same is also true for the aeronautical charges that we pay to airports. So it's basically a reflection of infrastructure costs that are paid by the airline and not paid through the tax box of the passenger.
So just to simplify a little bit, how much of that $30 on average would WestJet keep, and how much would flow through to NAV Canada and other government?
It all flows through.
All flows through. Thank you. And the next up is GST. I think we know what that is for $11.82. And then the next is the $9.46 charge for air traveler security charge. I know what that is, but perhaps you could share with the Canadians what that is.
Yeah, so that's money that's being paid for the security screening. However, this money doesn't go to CATSA that performs the security screening. It actually goes into the federal budget that then pays CATSA. And we assume, and we have strong belief to assume, that our passengers are actually overpaying for security charges. And the $9, that's the domestic charge. It actually goes up to I think it's somewhere in the mid-20s for international flights, although the process is the exact same thing. And this charge was just hiked by 33%. And at least as far as I could see it, I didn't see 33% additional agents doing screening. So it's just a straight price increase for Canadians.
Thank you for that. And the next is $25 for airport improvement fee.
Yeah. That's a charge that's being charged by the airports directly to the passenger, on top of what the airports charge directly to the airline that's covered in the prior fare fee that I mentioned. Now, if this must have been a flight from Victoria to Winnipeg and not the other way around, because Winnipeg actually charges $45 AIF. So this is actually at the low end what you have been showing.
And then the final charge is GST on the airport improvement fee, so a government tax on a government fee. Okay, I'm just going. So another embedded cost, another government embedded, in addition to whatever corporate taxes and otherwise that WestJet might pay, is the carbon tax. Does WestJet pay carbon tax, and if so, how much?
Absolutely, we pay carbon tax, and that's again embedded in the airfare that we charge. So it's first collected by the airline, and then we pay it on. And it's only charged for intra-provincial flights. So only on a Calgary to Edmonton flight. So that has been.
I think that's an important point to highlight. So, because the carbon tax is supposed to be there to make you select choices that reduces your carbon footprint. But the way that it works in the aviation space is that if I fly from Toronto to Vancouver, I'm not paying carbon tax, or the airline's not paying carbon tax, whichever you want to slice it. But if I fly a shorter flight from Toronto to Ottawa, then I do have to pay. You do have to pay carbon tax.
That is correct, and the amount has been 10 million in 2024. I want to highlight in that context that there are lots of additional carbon reduction costs coming into this sector, and by 2028 we will be paying far north of 100 million on all of these things. By the way, half of it just coming from British Columbia.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, just a reminder, I'm going to be quite firm with the time today because I know everybody wants to get their questions in. If you see the yellow card, it's a 30-second reminder. If you see the red card, it means that I will be cutting you off. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation. Next, we will go to Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, you have the floor. 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I guess my first question is to WestJet. How does WestJet's approach to baggage fees compare to other carriers throughout Canada?
So I believe our approach is very, very similar. So there's a baggage fee that. So first of all, many people can have a carry-on can have a checked bag for free. Yeah? So if you buy a higher fare type, or if you're a loyalty member, or if you have a credit card from WestJet, you actually get your first bag or sometimes more that you can check for free. And then the price is actually very transparent. You can look it up on our website. And the price differs from when you pay it. So if you buy it at booking, you pay the least. And if you buy it at the airport, basically when you show up, then it is more, because obviously we want this transaction to happen early in the process, so we give an incentive to do this early.
In the last quarter, since implementing these fees, what have your revenues been?
So we are a private company, so we don't disclose specific revenue numbers. But let me make a broader point, which is if you look around the industry, you will find that almost all airlines actually make more revenues on optional fees than they make a profit, which means in turn that airlines subsidize their base fare through optional fees, which is good because it actually allows airlines to offer lower fares to those that select lower fares and don't select an optional fee, compared to what airlines would be able to do if they were not be able to get those fees. Because if it would be all the same price, it would be higher for everyone.
Now, you made some comments earlier about the fees that you're charged from the government, fees that you're charged from airports, fees that you're charged from security. Being in business myself for many years, one of the things I try to do, both with my customers as well as my suppliers and others that I'm in partnership with, to make sure that our company not only runs smoothly for us, but more importantly, it runs smoothly for the people that we serve. With that said, and to enter into that true partnership, one of the things that this committee has previously asked for was for you to disclose your finances. Now, I understand you are a private company and you do have that choice, and of course, to date, it's been not good. No, it's been the answer. However, I go back to my earlier comment. One of the things that I would be very interested in is seeing what that gross, that net is, taking into consideration the other side of the balance sheet when it comes to the fact of the expenses that you do have, some of which you've mentioned today, and to see what areas that we as a government can actually look at to partner with you to mitigate those affordability issues. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. That's why we're here right now. We're here based on affordability for the passengers. So I'll ask the question again. And this is with I'll use the word sincere intent to, as a government, look at the possibilities that may lie ahead of us with respect to affordability, that we can work together towards affordability for the customer, the passenger. So I'll ask again, is there an opportunity for us to sit down, have you disclose your finances, and we can look at exactly what areas we can work on?
So first of all, we are always happy to sit down and also talk about specific numbers. I've no problems about that as long as it's in a closed room. However, I want to say what I already said in my introductory remarks. If we really care about affordability in Canada, the main hurdle, and it has been said by all the others as well, are the sky-high and off-the-chart high fees and charges that government-controlled entities charge airlines. And this is far beyond what you see in other countries. It basically, if it's $100 per ticket, basically means that if you are entering the market as a new entrant and you want to price break by offering double-digit ticket end price, you basically subsidize your tickets until you're bankrupt. And the graveyard of passed away airlines in Canada is really big, and just 2 airlines were just added this year alone, and that's the reality, and that's the challenge that makes it very difficult for to offer those low fares that Canadians would need, because this is a country where air travel is essential.
That's the whole purpose of this dialogue. At the end of the day, sir, these costs will land somewhere. Either it's going to be a subsidy by Canadians, or it's a user pay system paid by you. So the cost has to land somewhere. Hence the reason for my earlier comments and my questions and my desire to sit down, look at your balance sheets, and see exactly where you're standing with respect to your margins, what you're making, what you can absorb, most importantly, to then therefore mitigate the challenge for you, then therefore your customers, but more importantly, is to mitigate the subsidies that would otherwise land on Canadians to then put more money in your pocket. And that's what's key here. So we want, I want to see that.
Yeah.
You're making a lot of claims here, but I want to see how credible those claims are by looking at the numbers on your balance sheet.
I'm more than happy to discuss all those details. That's no problem at all. But what I want to say, the user pay model needs a reform for sure, because the user pay plus model, users pay in excess of the infrastructure that they use. And this, by the way, in a sharp contrast to how you deal with other modes of transportation. Rail receives billions of subsidies, although only a tiny fraction of Canadian uses it. If we were to receive, just as a thought experiment, if we were to receive the same per passenger subsidy as Via Rail gets, we could not just let everyone fly for free, we could even hand them out cash as they enter the airplane. That's the reality in this country.
And that here, again, is affordability. And we want to make sure that the affordability lands on the people that it should land on. We don't need to have Canadians subsidizing, put money in your pocket, but affordability for the customers that actually fly in your planes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barsalou-Duval. À vous la parole.
Next, we have Mr. Barsalou-Duval. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll start my questions with Air Transit. Welcome to all of the witnesses. It's great to have the explanations that you've given about the Cs that we've seen recently and added in recent years in air transportation. Ms. Gerard, you are one of the only air carriers that does not charge for cabin baggage. And I would like to know, at Air Transit, how was that decision made? Do you intend to continue this? And I'll ask 3 questions in one. But I'm particularly interested in the third question. What percentage of your clients don't take cabin baggage? First of all, we've taken note of the announcement by Air Canada and the fact that all of our Canadian competitors are applying a type of user fee for cabin baggage applicable to passengers in some markets. And now, for competition reasons, we can't necessarily announce our commercial intentions. We have a number of streams of ticket, 5, to give the most choice to our travelers. But in all of them, cabin baggage is included in all classes. the percentage of people, well, we don't have the same network as others, so we can't really compare ourselves to WestJet or Porter. We have an international network. So depending on the routes, on long-haul trips, people, of course, have cabin baggage more frequently on shorter routes. And then some people just have a backpack, or I understand that you don't have any specific numbers necessarily at hand, inaudible. But in the media, some commentators or experts have advanced that 90% of people who travel with cabin baggage. Is that something that sounds correct on your end? It really depends on our routes, on long-haul routes between Canada and Europe. Nearly 50% of people have checked baggage in the cargo, and 50% have cabin baggage, and that varies depending on the destination. Thank you very much. And now a question for WestJet. We learned that not only do the infamous new $35 fees charged by Air Canada for cabin baggage, not only will they be charged each way, but in addition to that, it won't even be in the cabin, it will be in the cargo. The cargo hold. Is there a possibility to have cabin baggage, or is it sent into the cargo hold?
Really cannot speak to what competitors offer, so actually I don't know. But I can speak to what we offer, and our ultra basic fare foresees that if you buy an ultra basic fare, you cannot bring a large carry-on bag into the cabin. So if you have a large carry-on bag, you have to check it in, and then it goes down into the cargo hold.
Je comprends, mais
I understand, but the cabin baggage that follows the specifications, it stays in the cabin, or it goes into the cargo hold if they pay for a cabin baggage?
So ultra basic customers cannot pay for a cabin baggage. So they can bring their small cabin baggage, but if they have a large one, it can only go into the cargo hold. Because part of it is also that, again, it's a choice. Everyone who buys this fare knows this. So this is not a surprise. This is something that someone deliberately chooses. And we see that, so we had 1.2 million Canadians that bought an ultra basic fare and did not bring a bag for the overhead bin, and did also not check a bag. Yeah? So that's a real saving. But if they do show up with a bag, it has to go into the cargo hold.
I don't know how much time I have left. Perhaps it's a language issue, but I'm not sure I understood the answer. The reason why I'm asking my question is because there's a lot of people who are deciding to have cabin baggage because they're worried that their baggage will be lost if it's in the cargo hold. So if all air carriers are saying, well, we're forcing consumers to put their bags in the cargo hold when at the end of the day they're already worried about losing their bags, what we're doing is that we're forcing consumers to lose their bags, and we should be doing the opposite, should we not?
Yeah, but there's not enough space in the passenger cabin for all the bags that people will potentially want to bring. So they have to go into the cargo bay, and that's just the case. And if a passenger really wants to bring a carry-on bag, a big one, then they can buy a different fare class. Again, it's all down to choice.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barcelou Duval.
Dan, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank everybody for coming today. Your responses really help us as members of Parliament be able to talk to our constituents and keep them informed. So I'm going to go back to the basic fares. We discussed, and I think there was some talks about the number of people that actually travel with no baggage, no carry-on. Your number could from WestJet. Could you just give me that number again?
So far, since we introduced it, it was 1.2 million that did not check a bag, not bring a carry-on bag, and bought an ultra basic fare, and collectively saved more than 20 million.
Yeah, perfect. And so Air Transat had a number that was about 50% that you said that travel with no baggage?
Nope. No. I'm just saying that depending on the routes, people will travel with different baggage patterns, which is totally normal. So since we operate mostly long-haul flights, people will half of the time bring a carry-on, half of the time will register their baggage in cargo.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And then Porter, have you had a chance to give a number on how many people fly without carry-ons?
So I provided a number that of people who purchase basic fares with Porter, 8% bring a carry-on bag.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand here when you're talking about what that actually looks like, because the way I see it is more and more people will end up buying the basic amount or the baseline, whatever the baseline is for each. I know everybody's kind of got a different name, but then are going to be paying for those add-ons. So I'm wondering, what does that look like when we pay the base amount and then start adding in the cost for carry-on, the cost for checked bags, cost for seat selection? Does it end up costing travelers more once we start adding all those fees on?
So it's a bit like when you buy a meal at McDonald's. Yeah? So if you buy a cheeseburger and fries and Coke separately, it's going to cost more than if you buy all the three of it as a value fare. And it's the same here. If you buy an ultra basic and then you add everything you could potentially add, it will cost more than if you just upsell to the next higher fare class, which is an economy fare. And that's what many do. If they want to bring this, then they buy the economy fare and they got it all as part of it.
So I guess my concern then is going to be about, you told us that a lot of airlines are making money on add-ons. So if that's the way you're making the vast majority of your money is on these add-ons, then isn't that just encouraging airlines to just create more add-ons so that passengers end up paying more in the long run?
Well, if airlines wouldn't receive revenues in optional add-ons, they would have to raise their base fare, which would be mandatory for all passengers. So that's, again, it's all about choice. We want to offer the lowest price to those that care about the lowest price, and we offer a higher service set at a higher price for those that can afford it. And that's the right thing to do. You want those people who are ready and willing to pay more to subsidize those that can afford the least. By the way, that's exactly what you do in your tax system. You tax those that can afford it more than those that cannot afford it. And that's the right thing to do. And that's exactly what we are doing as an airline.
Okay. And I guess, so you also, again, I'm going back to WestJet, and unfortunately, just because he provided some stuff, like, talk about getting rid of the user pay model. Who ends up paying for the fees, like security screening and any of those things? And as a taxpayer, where does that money come from?
So I didn't say to get rid of the user pay model. I said reform it. So I worked in Europe for many, many years, and Europe also has a user pay system. But interestingly, the fee per passenger is about half of what it is in Canada, and the infrastructure is better. So I think there's a good point to think about how this entire sector is being governed, because the way it's being governed actually has created a sky-high cost structure at a below average infrastructure. And that's a problem. And I'm not saying this for any other reason than because I believe that there is a great opportunity to improve air travel for Canadians, to have better infrastructure and better service, and have at least a portion of the market that receives lower ticket prices.
So if I had to ask today, what would be the one thing that we have to change as a government, or one thing the government has to change that would lower these fees for the average Canadian?
So we have made a few policy proposals, and the first one is the government should stop collecting airport rents from the airports. They pay almost $500 million in airport rents. The airports should keep this money to either lower the airport improvement fees or repair their debt or invest into infrastructure, but not fund the federal budget. That's number one. Number two is the government should do a proper review of how to properly set up a user pay system or potentially even, like in the US, a partly taxpayer-supported system. So that's a choice for the government. Either way is good, but either way will be better than what we have. And the third thing is, until such a review is being completed, there should be no additional financial burden added to the sector, because every burden that's being added to the sector will end up in the ticket price.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dance. Next, we'll go to Mr. Viss. Mr. Viss, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be directing my questions to WestJet to begin. I will note, I'll give an example about the sky-high user fees and charges. I parked my car at the Vancouver airport on December 8th, and I picked it up on December 12th at the parkade adjacent to the departures area. The Vancouver Airport Authority charged me $325 to park my car. They doubled those costs in without telling anyone. Normally, I was paying $177 to park my car there. Now it's $325, and they did that during the holiday season. So I take your comments about sky-high user fees very seriously. So my first question is, how much business do we lose to the United States because of the sky-high airport fees that we're paying in Canada?
Thank you for that question. There are a couple of airports that are very close to the US border in Buffalo and Bellingham, just to say two. And we estimate that about 7 million Canadians go across the border to fly from US airports close to the border to enjoy the lower fees and charges that those airports offer. So that's a border leakage that is actually detrimental to Canada, because those people actually they are just gone to the US, and they improve business in the US, and they are lost for Canada.
As an MP for Abbotsford, is it safe to say that there would be a positive economic impact in the Fraser Valley if the government of Canada reformed its user fee model and reduced its airport rents to encourage Canadians to use Canadian companies and Canadian airports?
100%. That's a correct assumption. There would be significantly more. By the way, it's also interesting that almost no low-cost carriers from the US fly into Canada, because they want to avoid the high cost in Canada and the high regulatory risk that comes from flying into Canada. By the way, we estimate that if the government and third-party imposed fees and charges would be half of what they are, which would be more in line with other countries, this would stimulate enough demand to fuel another airline of the size of WestJet. Or to reframe it the other way around, there are more than 10 million Canadians that are currently fenced off from using airplanes because of this high price hurdle that's imposed from third-party and government-controlled fees and charges. That's the reality in this country,
Okay,
and
so
that's what we collectively need to work on.
High taxes, high user fees has a negative impact on the airport sector in Canada, both in terms of passengers and the offshoots in our broader economy, where we do have those key airports like my community of Abbotsford.
Exactly, and it fences off low-income Canadians that cannot afford the ticket because this price is just too high.
Thank you. My second question to WestJet is regarding the carbon tax. When a future Conservative government axes the carbon tax, can WestJet assure that tickets will go down? The ticket costs will go down as a result?
Yes, we will. So far, though, the carbon tax is 10 million because it's only confined to intra-provincial flying. But what I said before, this is going up by more than tenfold over the years to come, with all the provincial, national, and international efforts to reduce carbon emission. This will become a very, very big burden for airlines and therefore for passengers if this trend continues. And
so I can safely say that to my constituents who fly regularly for business to Edmonton and Calgary from Abbotsford, that by axing the carbon tax, they will see a reduction in the cost they're paying on their airline ticket.
So between Abbotsford and Edmonton, there is no carbon tax because this is an inter-provincial flight.
My apologies. Thank you.
But from Prince George to Vancouver, yes.
From Prince George to Vancouver, okay. Thank you so much. My third question relates to babies. I have a young daughter, I have a young son, and constituents in my riding want to make sure that baby bags are not subject to bag fees, as we have discussed earlier. A quick answer.
They are not. They are not subject to this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Viss. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the guests today that are answering our questions in regards to these fees that are being charged by WestJet and now, of course, proposed by Air Canada. But there's a couple of points I want to make, though. One is that since the COVID era, of course, WestJet has been noticeably absent from, and I discussed this with Mr. Gibbons a number of times, from regional rural airports, which is creating a real problem for travelers like me. For instance, the only way I can get into Gander and out of Gander is because of Air Canada and provincial airlines. And accessibility is a big problem. So our major concern is access to regional airports like Gander and others in rural Canada is a real challenge. I used to be a regular WestJet customer with the card that you talked about that gave me some benefits. I liked the airline, enjoyed the service when I was able to access the service. But because of that, now, of course, I'm no longer a WestJet customer because I can't get to unless I drive a long distance to St. John's or somewhere else, fly to Halifax or somewhere to get to use the airline services. So my concern is how soon are you going to be able to move from this urban model of flying that you currently have and get back into these regional hubs, I call them, like Gander, for example, in the rural parts of Canada, because that's sadly missing. And these fees are not something I like, but that's a bigger concern right now.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So first of all, I want to dispute we do fly to many regional airports, and especially in Western Canada, and this is a big part of our strategy. But what I will say, though, is that especially those high fees and charges are burdening regional airports more than the big airports, because those routes often are very, very marginal, and if then the prices go up and therefore less people fly, or it cannot be put on the ticket price, then those routes can easily go under. And by the way, APPR is also a big risk for regional flying, because if you have just one flight that becomes APPR eligible, this can easily eat off the entire profit for the year, so then you can equally just not fly. Yeah. By the way, I just want to say, I think it's a pity that you did not invite any of the CEOs of the northern regional airlines like Canadian North or any of those regional, because they actually have to deal with exactly this every single day.
I've got 5 minutes here, not a lot of time to ask many questions. But, when I see routes being cut out in parts of Canada that are important to me in my region, in my province, and fees going up, that leaves a very poor taste in my mouth. And I'm no different from whether airline it is. I say the same to Air Canada. Air Canada, to their credit, has maintained routes, either through Air Jazz or provincial airlines, to keep servicing Gander and some of these smaller regional airports. But the cost of doing that has gone through the roof. If you talk to people in Nappy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador, and Wabush, flying interprovincial, it's enormous amounts of money to fly from these one location to the other, to the capital city of St. John's. So Air Canada, I ask you, why are you considering fees for baggages when you consider the cost that is added to people's flights?
Sorry, Mr. Rogers, Air Canada's in the second panel. They're not on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
that's okay. I just wanted to remind you of that. They're on the second panel. So if you have a question for Porter or WestJet, or Air Transat?
What I just can say to your regional concern, I think there are great examples around the world. The US has an essential air service program. Europe has a public service obligation program where that actually supports small regional flights. And I think Canada should actually look at those programs and consider whether this is something that Canada could also adapt for Canada. And I think Andy had one more comment.
Mr. Rogers, I just want to touch on Newfoundland and Labrador because it was 2 years ago at this committee you asked very point blank whether or not WestJet would leave that province. And what we said at the time was we had no intent to leave that province and we intended to grow. And since then, you've seen that we've addressed the biggest air access gap the province had, which was direct flights to Europe. And actually next summer, we have a daily flight to and from Europe to the province, which has been so incredibly well received. And even a small community like Sydney, Nova Scotia, we added a new flight next summer. So we have a very strong growth story in Newfoundland and Labrador. I know that we are missed in Gander.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. I'm going to have to cut you off there. Unfortunately, I'm trying to stick to everybody's time. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, à vous la parole. 2 minutes.
You have the floor, Mr. Barsalou-Duval, for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been listening to you since earlier, and I'm having a hard time following you. Someone who flies for 2, 3, up to 6 hours without any hand baggage, well, I think that's the exception and not the rule. You may contradict me, but I'd like to see what percentage of passengers don't take checked baggage or hand baggage. But you're talking about hand baggage, but before you didn't charge for checked baggage either. So when you add fees to these flights, you're talking about no checked baggage, no hand baggage. So consumers, when they choose their flight, that's not the real price that they're going to pay, and I think that's an issue. At the end of the day, they may travel with one company or another, but how do we ensure that all companies charge the same price for checked baggage and hand baggage? How can consumers navigate all of this?
So we had 1.2 million Canadians that did buy an ultra basic fare and did not bring a large carry-on bag and did not check a bag. So that's actually a significant number. It's about half of all the ultra basic passengers that we had. By the way, if someone has a WestJet credit card, they can buy an ultra basic fare and check a bag for free. So there are ways for, or if they have a loyalty status, they can do the same. So there are many ways that you can actually enjoy the low fare and you're able to do it. And with regard to prices, so obviously that's pricing, how much a bag costs. So there can never be a uniform price among competitors because this is price competition that competitors will never talk about.
Merci. Donc vous me confirmez que justement c'est très difficile.
Thanks. So you're confirming that it is very difficult for consumers to compare airlines because when we compare air tickets and the fees, there are types of hidden fees that harm their choice when they need to make a choice. I think that's problematic.
Because people, it's very transparent. So people can look up the fees and people know it. So they don't blindly book something and then suddenly find out they have to pay something. They can see it as part of the booking process how much it would cost.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Barsalou.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barsalou-Duval.
Ms. Dance, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard that the external fees, that if they were lowered, that it would cost less for travelers and they would be able to save money. But knowing that companies, like all of yours, have the financial responsibility to their stakeholders to make as much money as possible, what's the guarantee that even if we can manage to convince the government to lower these fees, that you just won't keep your prices at that same level or higher?
That's very easy. As I said before, we have been flying 5 million empty seats, and we would like to fill those seats. And the way to fill those seats is by having people flying that otherwise wouldn't be flying. And as I said before, if the fees and charges would be half of what they are today, this would allow us to offer tickets at an all-in ticket price that would get people off their couch to go into an airplane. Because they then can afford it. So this would grow the pie. There would be more than 10 million additional people in Canada that would then be able to fly and that can't fly today. And that's our gain. So our gain is not to put the price up, but our gain is to stimulate new people that would otherwise not fly.
But don't you think more people would fly if it was more reasonably priced?
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? That's exactly what I'm saying. More
But-
people would fly if the minimum price that you can offer would be lower. So right now, you basically cannot offer a ticket price that's below $100. If you go to Europe, people fly for 39 euro or dollar or whatever you want to take it. Yeah. So that's because the taxes and fees that are being added to the ticket is much lower in Europe, and that's why Ryanair can actually do it. And they offer the cheapest prices, and they are the most profitable airline in Europe. I mean, if you just put these things together, it's pretty obvious where the problem sits.
Yeah, and I've flown Ryanair, and I was able, as a single mom, to hop around Europe with my son and be able to afford their $30 and $40 tickets, and it was extremely reasonable. And I think that's the problem. I would have loved to have traveled across Canada with my son, but those prices here are just far outpacing those things, and I don't always and. I get that you're talking about those external fees, but I think that a lot of it still is the individual fee that people are forced to pay when it comes down to all these things. And I mean, I booked a ticket with my son a few years ago, and we didn't make it to sit together. And I was like, what do you mean we don't get to sit together? And she was like, oh, well, it was the way it was booked because I paid for my ticket and used his for points. And they wanted to charge me to move him so that we could sit together. And I was shocked by it, trying to figure out a way to make that work. And my son was like, oh, I'll sit by myself. I was like, yeah, no, not going to happen. It's just one of those things. Like, I think that if we had, and we see it in the South, in the U.S., some of their seats as well. So I'm trying to put my head around this and wrap my head around it.
Just one comment.
Unfortunately, we don't have
families
time.
can sit together with no charge.
Thank you very much. Next, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Mr. von Hansbroek, if I can get it. Thank you. Did you have anything else? Did you just want to finish off the response to Ms. Dance? I'll let you do that. But if you're good, you're good.
No, I just want to say that we try to seat families together, and if for whatever reason they would not be seated together, they can change their seat with no cost.
The balance of my time I'll spend with you, Mr. Deleuze. We heard from WestJet that high fees and the carbon tax are preventing air passenger travel. My question is more with respect to competition. Porter's been able to do what many thought was impossible, which was to break in, just like WestJet, I guess as well, into the air market. If in fact fees were decreased, if the carbon tax was removed and was more favorable, do you think that another Porter airline would have an easier route than you had?
Yes, absolutely. As highlighted by other members here today, the tax environment is very onerous on travelers in Canada. And with a lower tax regime, there'd be a significant increase in overall passenger traffic, which would make it easier for new competitors to enter the market. And carriers with different financial models, even those different than Porter, including ultra low-cost carriers that really depend on low fares stimulating traffic.
Thank you, and thank you for traveling in, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for your testimony there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. And finally, for this first hour, we'll turn the floor over to Mr. Iachino. Mr. Iachino, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are addressed to all three airline companies. I would like short answers, yes, no, and a few words, please. To every airline, was your airline company bailed out during COVID? And by whom? Go ahead, WestJet.
No, we didn't receive any government money during COVID.
Air Transit?
Yes, we did receive money from the
By who?
government. By the
Porter?
federal government.
Porter?
Loans.
Yes, from the federal government through
WestJet.
loans.
Thank you. WestJet, your employees didn't get any money from the federal government?
We received the Canadian emergency
Thank
rate.
you.
We
You
received
did
the
receive
Canadian
money.
emergency
That's all I
rate.
want to know. Yes
Yeah,
or no?
I'm answering
I
it
don't
as you
want any-
asked.
I want you to just give me a yes
Yeah.
or no. So do you truly believe that this is acceptable at a time when Canadians' pocketbooks are hurting and when they've been saving for their travels for you to react this way? When you were having a hard time, the government of Canada bailed you out financially. Is that correct to each airline? Directly or indirectly? Through you, directly through a company, or through your employees? Did the government of Canada bail you out when you were having a hard time?
Today that
Yes or no, please?
we've passed savings on to consumers, so I don't understand what
Thank you.
what you're asking.
Order. Order.
I'm not sure what the question is. Sorry, can you repeat?
When you were having a hard time, did the government of Canada bail you out?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we were recipients of a leaf loan.
Do you know, Porter? Thank you. Air Transit, what's your response?
We've received the leaf loan, just so that everybody understands as well. Other countries have received subsidies.
Okay, so you've all had good net profits, right? But do you know who financed?
No.
Do you know?
That's not correct, sir.
Excuse me.
That's not correct, sir.
Do you know who financed? Excuse me, I have a question to ask. Do you know who financed the government of Canada? Do you know? Do you know who finances the government of Canada? Does anybody know of the three companies that are here today? I guess you don't know, but let me tell you, it's the citizens, Canadians. Yes, Canadian citizens. Those same citizens that travel on your planes, those same citizens who today would need a little support, would need a little relief. So here you are imposing all these fees on Canadians. And if you don't remember, it was Canadians that bailed you out in hard times. Thank you very much for showing good support, consideration towards Canadians.
Yeah. So
Thank you very much, Mr.
unlike the
Iacchino.
government, airlines have been very successful
Mr.
in
Chair,
lowering fares.
Point of order. Generally, you give the witness the same amount of time as you've spoken. Mr. Iacchino took all the time. I think WestJet deserves 30 seconds to
I will
respond.
say this, Mr. Lawrence, members are free to ask questions or to make statements during their time. He's chosen to make
Point of
statements
order.
and ask questions.
Point of order, Chair.
Colleagues, Mr. Iacchino, I just want to say we are done with the first hour. We do have a
Point of
second
order,
panel
Mr.
here. I'll listen to your point of order, Mr. Iacchino.
I did ask specific responses. It was a yes, no.
And I referenced that. You did ask questions,
Thank you.
so you used a portion of your time for questions. You used a portion of your time for comments. You're allowed to do both, sir. With that, I want to thank all of the witnesses for appearing with us here in person or online and for sharing their testimony today.